Organizational psychology. Let me tell you a quick story about industrial organizational psychology. It's kind of the business arm of psychology. I had a student who was from Bangladesh and started out as a math and computer science major. The people in Asia tend to be very practical people, and of course, they want to do something that helps everyone. They're collectivistic. So he decided that he didn't really want to do computer science. He'd rather do something that was a little more human. So he decided to go into environmental science. He did that for a semester, and then he realized I taught him in gen psych class, and he got so interested in what I was doing, and he enjoyed the class so much, he decided that he would go into psychology, decided to study psychology. But he didn't want to do just any old psychology. He certainly didn't want to do counseling. So he decided to do something as practical a thing as he possibly could. So he went into industrial organizational psychology. He got his master's and PhD in industrial organizational psychology. Um, and he taught for about 5 years. The problem was that there aren't a lot of jobs for industrial organizational psychologists in psychology. He wanted to teach. Didn't really work out very well, and I actually haven't heard from him for about 6 months. So I'm not exactly sure what happened to him. The last time I was helping him move from one place to another because he's a foreigner, and so he started out in Duluth, Minnesota. Well, he went to school in Dayton, Ohio, at Wright State, and then he went to Duluth, Minnesota, and taught in a business program, and then he taught at out in Massachusetts. Where was it? Salem State in Massachusetts in a psychology program. And then he went to Franklin College in Indianapolis, or actually it's in Franklin, Indiana, just south of Indianapolis, and taught in a psychology program. Then he went down to Valdosta State in Georgia, southern Georgia, right on the border of Florida, and taught in an HR program, in a master's program. And of course, the reason he took the job is because it was prestigious, and he was looking for a more prestigious job. Anyway, so last I heard, he hadn't found another job for this year. That was last year that he taught there. So I don't know. I don't know. But we'll talk about industrial organizational psychology. He tried to explain to me how much fun it was, how much better it was than general psychology, which is what my major was. So let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 13, Industrial Organizational Psychology. Industrial organizational, there you go. That's actually a power plant, a nuclear power plant. On 2019, people who worked in the United States spent an average of 42 to 54 hours per week working. Sleeping was the only other activity that they spent more time on, with an average of about 43 to 62 hours per week. The workday is a significant portion of a worker's time and energy. It impacts their lives and their families, lives in positive and negative physical and psychological ways. Industrial and organizational, or IO psychology, is a branch of psychology that studies how human behavior and psychology affect work and how they are affected by work. Now, this is really kind of interesting because this is the only textbook I have seen with a chapter dealing with general psychology textbook with a chapter dealing with industrial organizational psychology. The textbook I used before, the textbook I've been using for the last 30 years, nothing on industrial organizational psychology, it's a paragraph in a PowerPoint somewhere. But this textbook has a whole chapter on it. So we'll go ahead and see what we can do. Industrial and organizational psychologists work in four main contexts: academia, government, consulting firms, and business. And they can make a lot of money. They probably make more money than just about anybody else in psychology. Why? Because they work for businesses, and businesses pay much, much better than academia. Academia doesn't pay very well at all. So if you're after the big bucks, which is what he was after the big bucks. Um, don't get into industrial organizational psych, or don't get into psychology. You're not going to make a whole lot of money. Most IO psychologists have a master's or a doctorate degree. The field of IO psychology can be divided into three broad areas: industrial, organizational, and human factors. Industrial psychology is concerned with describing job requirements and assessing individuals for their ability to meet those requirements. In addition, once employees are hired, industrial psychology studies and develops ways to train, evaluate, and respond to those evaluations. As a consequence of its concern for candidate characteristics, industrial psychology must also consider issues of legality regarding discrimination in hiring. Organizational psychology is a discipline interested in how the relationships among employees affect those employees and the performance of a business. This includes studying worker satisfaction, motivation, and commitment. This field also studies management, leadership, and organizational culture, as well as how an organization structures, management and leadership styles, social norms, and role expectations affect individual behavior. Sorry, I had a cat fight. As a result of its interest in worker well-being and relationships, organizational psychology also considers the subjects of harassment, including sexual harassment and workplace violence. Human factor psychology is the study of how workers interact with the tools of work and how to design those tools to optimize workers' productivity, safety, and health. These studies can involve interactions as straightforward as the fit of a desk, chair, and computer to a human having to sit on a chair at the desk using the computer for several hours each day. They can also include the examination of how humans interact with complex displays and their ability to interpret them accurately and quickly. In Europe, this field is referred to as ergonomics, and there you go, ergonomics. Occupational health psychology deals with the stress, diseases, and disorders that can affect employees as a result of the workplace. The field is informed by research from the medical, biological, psychological, organizational, human factors, human resources, and industrial fields. Individuals in this field seek to examine the ways in which the organization affects the quality of work life for an employee and the responses that employees have towards their organization or as a result of their organization's influence on them. The responses for employees are not limited to the workplace, as there may be some spillover into their personal lives outside of work, especially if there is not good work-life balance. The ultimate goal of an occupational health psychologist is to improve the overall health and well-being of an individual and, as a result, increase the overall health of the organization. Humanitarian work psychology was developed as a brainchild of a small group of IO psychologists. The group seeks to help marginalized members of society, such as low-income individuals, find work. They help to determine ways to deliver humanitarian aid during major catastrophes. They also reach out to those in the local community who do not have the knowledge, skills, and abilities, the KSAs, to be able to find gainful employment that would enable them to not need to receive aid. Humanitarian work psychologists try to help the underserved individuals develop KSAs that they can use to improve their lives and their current situations. When ensuring these underserved individuals receive training or education, the focus is on skills that, once learned, will never be forgotten and can serve individuals throughout their lifetimes as they seek employment. Industrial and organizational psychology had its origins in the early 20th century. In 1913, Hugo Münsterberg published Psychology and Industrial Efficiency, which covered topics such as employee selection, employee training, and effective advertising. Walter Dill Scott was one of the first psychologists to apply psychology to advertising, management, and personnel selection. In 1903, Scott published two books, The Theory of Advertising and Psychology of Advertising. They are the first books to describe the use of psychology in the business world. By 1911, he published two more books, Influencing Men in Business and Increasing Human Efficiency in Business. In 1916, a newly formed division in the Carnegie Institute of Technology hired Scott to conduct applied research on employee selection. Now, an interesting thing about Carnegie Institute, it's now called Carnegie Mellon. It's in Pittsburgh, and if you know anything about where steel comes from, once upon a time, Pittsburgh was the steel capital of the United States. During World War I, Robert Yerkes organized a group under the Surgeon General's office that developed methods for screening and selecting enlisted men. They developed the Army Alpha Test to measure mental abilities. The Army Beta Test was a nonverbal form of the test that was administered to illiterate and non-English speaking draftees. Scott and Bingham organized a group under the Adjutant General's office with the group to develop selection methods for officers. They created a catalog of occupational needs for the Army, essentially a job description system and a system of performance ratings and occupational skill tests for officers. From 1929 to 1932, Elton Mayo and his colleagues began a series of studies at a plant near Chicago, Western Electric's Hawthorne Works. This long-term project took industrial psychology beyond just employee selection and placement to a study of more complex problems of interpersonal relations, motivation, and organizational dynamics. These studies marked the origin of organizational psychology. They began as research into the effects of physical work environments, for example, level of lighting in a factory, but the researchers found that the psychological and social factors in the factory were of more interest than the physical factors. These studies also examined how human interaction factors such as supervisorial style increased or decreased productivity. Analysis of the findings by later researchers led to the term the Hawthorne effect, which describes the increase in performance of individuals who are aware that they're being observed by researchers or supervisors. When the original researchers found was that any change in a variable, such as lighting levels, led to an improvement in productivity. This was true even when the change was negative, such as a return to poor lighting. The effect faded when the attention faded. So the more attention you give somebody, the more likely that they will increase their productivity. The Hawthorne effect concept endures today as an important experimental consideration in many fields and a factor that has to be controlled in an experiment. In other words, an experimental treatment of some kind may produce an effect simply because it involves greater attention of the researchers on the participants, and that's known as the Hawthorne effect. You pay attention to somebody and they will increase their productivity. In the 1930s, Kurt Lewin conducted research on the effects of various leadership styles, team structure, and team dynamics. Lewin is considered the founder of social psychology, and much of his work and that of his students produced results that had important influences in organizational psychology. Lewin and his students' research included an important early study that used children to study the effect of leadership style on aggression, group dynamics, and satisfaction. Lewin was also responsible for coining the term group dynamics, and he was involved in studies of group interactions, cooperation, competition, and communication that bear on organizational psychology. The field of human factors psychology was developed by Frederick Taylor, who, as an engineer, saw that if one could redesign the workplace, there would be an increase in both output for the company and wages for the workers. The principles of scientific management, he examined management theories, personnel selection, and training, as well as the work itself using time and motion studies. Taylor argued that the principal goal of management should be to make the most money for the employer, along with the best outcome for the employee. He believed that the best outcome for the employee and management would be achieved through training and development so that each employee could provide the best work. He believed that by conducting time and motion studies for both the organization and the employee, the best interests of both were addressed. Time motion studies were methods aimed to improve work by dividing different types of operations into sections that could be measured. These analyses were used to standardize work and to check the efficiency of people and equipment. One example of Taylor's theory in action involved workers handling heavy iron ingots. Wait a second, I got a cat that is just going nuts. Sorry. Taylor showed that the workers could be more productive by taking work rests. This method of rest increased worker productivity from 12.5 to 47 tons moved per day with less reported fatigue, as well as increased wages for the workers who were paid by the ton. At the same time, the company's cost was reduced from 9.2 cents to 3.9 cents per ton. Lillian Gilbreth and her husband Frank worked to make workers more efficient by reducing the numbers of motions required to perform a task. She not only applied these methods to industry, but also to the home office, shops, and other areas. She investigated employee fatigue and time management stress and found many employees were motivated by money and job satisfaction. In 1914, Gilbreth wrote The Psychology of Management, the Function of the Mind in Determining, Teaching, and Installing Methods of Least Waste, and she is known as the mother of modern management. Now, one of the things about Lillian Gilbreth is that if you've ever read or even heard about the book Cheaper by the Dozen, that was actually about the Gilbreth family. She had 12 children, her and her husband Frank. Really an interesting book. It's kind of really funny how the family. I mean, they were both task managers, so everything that the kids did and everything the family did was very cost efficient. And there were a dozen children, and they all survived. It's really kind of fascinating. Walter Bingham was hired as the chief psychologist for the War Department, now the Department of Defense. And now, no, I guess they want to change it back to the Department of War. But initially it was a War Department, and now it's the Department of Defense. And legally, it's still the Department of Defense, but this administration wants to change the name. During World War II and developed new systems for job selection, classification, training, and performance review. plus methods for team development, moral change, and attitude change. Other countries, such as Canada and the United Kingdom, also saw growth in IO psychology during World War II. In the years after the war, both industrial psychology and organizational psychology became areas of significant research effort. Concerns about the fairness of employment tests arose, and the ethnic and gender biases in various tests were evaluated with mixed results. In addition, a great deal of research went into studying job satisfaction and employee motivation. Congress passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, stating that Title VII covered what is known as equal employment opportunity. This law protects employees against discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, as well as discrimination against an employee for associating with an individual in one of these categories. Organizations had to adjust to the social, political, and legal climate of the civil rights movement, and these issues studied are needed to be addressed by members of IO in research and practice. There are many reasons for organizations to be interested in IO, so they can better understand the psychology of their workers, which in turn helps them understand how their organizations can become more productive and competitive. And a lot of this, the argument about DEI, diversity, ethnicity, and I don't know, and I don't remember what the rest of it is. Anyway, that a lot of the argument about DEI has to do with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Before that, it was very difficult if you were non-white to find work. They could discriminate against you using the fact that you were of a different race. For not hiring you, they could discriminate against you because of your religion. They could discriminate against you because you were from Russia or from China or from Vietnam or whatever. So that's what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was all about. And that's what a lot of people are arguing about now. And when they talk about DEI, they're talking about undoing what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did. Industrial psychology focuses on identifying and matching persons to tasks within an organization. This involves job analysis, which means accurately describing the task or job. Then organizations must identify the characteristics of applicants for a match to the job analysis. It also involves training employees from their first day on the job throughout their tenure without the organization and appraising their performance along the way within the organization. IO psychologists write job descriptions. There are two related approaches to job analysis, task-oriented and worker-oriented. The task-oriented approach lists in detail the tasks that will be performed for the job. Each task is typically rated on scales for how frequently it is performed, how difficult it is, and how important it is to the job. The worker-oriented approach describes the characteristics required of the worker to successfully perform the job. This is called job specification. For job specification, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that the job requires are identified. Observation surveys and interviews are used to obtain the information required for both types of job analysis. It is possible to observe someone who is proficient in a position and analyze what skills are apparent. Another approach used is to interview people presently holding that position, their peers and their supervisors, to get a consensus of what they believe are the requirements of the job. The United States Department of Labor maintains a database of previously compiled job analyses for different jobs and occupations. This allows the IO psychologist to access previous analyses for nearly any type of occupation. This system is called the ONET, accessible at www.one2online. I don't know. Anyway, that's what it is. The site is open and you can see the KSAs that are listed for your own position or one you might be curious about. Each occupation lists the tasks, knowledge, skills, abilities, work context, work activities, education requirements, interests, personality requirements, and work styles that are deemed necessary for success in that position. You can also see data on average earnings and projected job growth in that industry. And of course, a lot of wages have to do with where you are. Uh, for example, if you're a sixth grade teacher, you're going to make a different amount of money in Iowa than you did in Florida, than you would in Arizona, than you can get in California or Wyoming or Montana or Michigan. And there are different requirements, educational requirements. In most states, you can teach without a master's degree, but there are some states that won't allow you to teach, even in elementary or junior high school, without a master's degree. Michigan is one of them. California is another one. So you have to have a master's degree. And in some states, they require you to have a master's degree in education, which makes absolutely no sense to me. But then again, I'm prejudiced. I don't really like education degrees. I think they're teaching you how to teach is one thing, but not having a knowledge base in your subject area is another thing. And that's what I don't agree with. Once a company identifies potential candidates for a position, the candidate's knowledge, skills, and other abilities must be evaluated and compared with the job description. These evaluations can involve testing and interview and work samples or exercises. Tests in the IO context are used to identify the personality characteristics of the candidate to match those to personality characteristics that would ensure good performance on the job. That looks like this, what is that? Anyway, it looks like he's doing well. Most jobs for mid-sized to large-sized businesses in the United States require a personal interview as a step in the step of the selection process. There's an oh, wait a minute. There we go. It is. It's right there. In the selection process. Okay. Because interviews are commonly used, they have been the subject of considerable research by industrial psychologists. Information derived from job analysis usually forms the basis for the types of questions asked. Interviews can provide a more dynamic source of information about the candidate than standard testing measures. Social factors and body language can influence the outcome of the interview. These include influences such as the degree of similarity of the applicant to the interviewer and nonverbal behaviors such as hand gestures, head nodding, and smiling. Like that. There are two types of interviews, unstructured and structured. In an unstructured interview, the interviewer may ask different questions of each different candidate. One candidate might be asked about her career goals, and another might be asked about his previous work experience. In an unstructured interview, the questions are often, though not always, unspecified beforehand. And in an unstructured interview, the responses to questions asked are generally not scored using a standard system. In a structured interview, the interviewer asks the same questions of every candidate. The questions are prepared in advance, and the interviewer uses a standardized rating system for each response. With the approach, the interviewer can accurately compare two candidates' interviews In a meta-analysis of studies examining the effectiveness of various types of job interviews, McDaniel and colleagues in 1994 found that structured interviews were more effective at predicting subsequent job performance of the job candidate. Why? Because they're asking the same questions over and over again, and they know exactly what they're looking for. It shows that they know exactly what they're looking for. A lot of times with unstructured interviews, you go off on a tangent, and so you don't learn the same thing from one candidate that you will from the other. That's Neil deGrasse Tyson when he was a younger fellow. You can see his tie. Training is an important element of success and performance in many jobs. Most jobs begin with an orientation period during which the new employee is provided information regarding the company history, policies, and administrative protocols such as time tracking, benefits, and reporting requirements. An important goal of orientation training is to educate the new employee about the organizational culture, the values, visions, hierarchies, norms, and ways the company's employees interact, essentially how the organization is run, how it operates, and how it makes decisions. There will also be training that is specific to the job the individual was hired to do, or training during the individual's period of employment that teaches aspects of new duties or how to use new physical or software tools. Mentoring is a form of informal training in which an experienced employee guides the work of a new employee. Mentors may be formally assigned to a new employee, or a mentoring relationship may develop informally. Mentoring effects on the mentor and the employee being mentored have been studied in recent years. A review of mentoring studies found significant but small effects of mentoring on performance, i.e., behavioral outcomes, motivation and satisfaction, and actual career outcomes. Allen et al. In 2004 found that mentoring positively affected a protege's compensation and number of promotions compared with non-mentored employees. Proteges were more satisfied with their careers and had greater job satisfaction. All the effects were small but significant. Mentoring is recognized to be particularly important to the career success of women by creating connections to informal networks, adopting a style of interaction that male managers are comfortable with, and with overcoming discrimination in job promotions. Gender combinations in mentoring relationships are also an area of active study. Ragens and Cotton in 1999 studied the effects of gender on the outcomes of mentoring relationships and found that proteges with a history of male mentors had significantly higher compensation, especially for male proteges. This study found that female mentor-male protege relationships were considerably rarer than the other gender combinations. A 2003 study by Arthur et al. Examined multiple other studies to determine how effective organizational training is. Their results showed that training was effective based on 4 types of measurement. 1, the immediate response of the employee to the training effort. 2, testing at the end of training to demonstrate that learning outcomes were met. 3, behavioral measurements of job activities by supervisors. And 4, such results such as productivity and profits. The examined studies represented diverse forms of the training, including self-instruction, lecture and discussion, and computer-assisted training. Industrial and organizational psychologists are typically involved in designing performance appraisal systems for organizations. These systems are designed to evaluate whether each employee is performing their job satisfactorily. Industrial and organizational psychologists study research and implement ways to make work evaluations as fair and positive as possible. They also work to decrease the subjectivity involved with performance ratings. Fairly evaluated work helps employees do their jobs better, improves the likelihood of people being in the right jobs for their talents, maintains fairness, and identifies company and individual training needs. Performance appraisals are typically documented several times a year, often with a formal process and an annual face-to-face brief meeting between an employee and his supervisor. It is important that the original job analysis play a role in performance appraisal as well as any goals that have been set by the employee or by the employee and supervisor. The meeting is often used for the supervisor to communicate specific concerns about the employee's performance and to positively reinforce elements of good performance. Performance appraisals are becoming more complex processes within organizations and are often used to motivate employees to improve performance and expand their areas of competence in addition to assessing their job performance. Performance appraisals can be used to identify opportunities for training or whether a particular training program has been successful. One approach to performance appraisal is called 360-degree feedback appraisal. In this system, the employee's appraisal derives from a combination of ratings by supervisors, peers, employees, supervised by the employee and from the employee herself or himself or themselves. Occasionally, outside observers may be used as well, such as customers. The purpose of 360-degree system is to give the employee, who may be a manager and supervisor, different perspectives of the employee's job performance. The system should help employees make improvements through their own efforts or through training. Many performance evaluations are disliked by organizations, employees, or both. Few of them have been adequately tested to see if they improve performance or motivate employees. One of the reasons evaluations fail to accomplish their purpose in an organization is that performance appraisal systems are often used incorrectly or are of an inappropriate type for an organization's particular culture. An organization's culture is how the organization is run, how it operates, and how it makes decisions. It is based on the collective values, hierarchies, and how individuals within the organization interact. And actually, this just happened at Dene College, or they've been trying to do this for about 3 or 4 years, and it has been an abysmal failure. Performance evaluations. Well, maybe they've done it now. Hiring decisions in the real world are often made based on factors other than matching a job analysis to KSAs. Interview rankings can be influenced by other factors, similarity to the interviewer and the regional accent of the interviewee. A meta-analysis of experimental studies found that physical attractiveness benefited individuals in various job-related outcomes such as hiring, promotion, and performance evaluation or performance review. They also found that the strength of the benefit appeared to be decreasing with time between the late 1970s and 1990s. And this is Ronaldo. He's a Portuguese soccer player. This is what he looked like when he first started playing soccer. And this is what he looks like today. Certainly got his teeth fixed. I think he got his nose. And of course, he's a soccer player, so he probably got his nose busted a couple times. But yeah, he's got a better haircut, that's for sure. I don't know if he's been sculpted or not. Let's see, his chin looks a little more pointed here. He may have had surgery. He's very wealthy. He's one of the best soccer players who has ever existed. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, is responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or an employee because of the person's race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, national origin, age, 40 or older, disability, or genetic information. And it's one of the reasons why I was able to get a job at Dene College, even at 65. I think I was 65 when I started. Is that right? Yep. Or was I 66? I guess I was 66. Anyway, they couldn't discriminate against me. And I had great credentials. The United States has several specific laws regarding fairness and avoidance of discrimination. The Equal Pay Act requires that equal pay for men and women in the same workplace who are performing equal work. Despite the law, persistent inequalities in earnings between men and women still exist. Corbett and Hill in 2012 studied the gender gap by looking at earnings in the first year after college in the United States. When all factors were corrected, the study found an unexplained 7 cents on the dollar gap in the first year after college that can be attributed to gender discrimination in pay. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 makes it illegal to treat individuals unfavorably because of their race or color of their skin. An employer cannot discriminate based on skin color, hair texture, or other immutable characteristics, which are traits of an individual that are fundamental to their identity in hiring, benefits, promotions, or termination of employees. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978 amends the Civil Rights Act. It prohibits job, for example, employment, pay, and termination, discrimination of a woman because she is pregnant, as long as she can perform the work required. And this is Lyndon Johnson when he signed the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And that's Martin Luther King Jr. right there. That's Johnson right here. I don't know any of these other guys. Federal legislation does not protect employees in the private sector from discrimination related to sexual orientation and gender identity. These groups include lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals. Federal legislation protects federal employees from such discrimination. The District of Columbia and 20 states have laws protecting public and private employees from discrimination for sexual orientation. Most of the states of these laws also protect against discrimination based on gender identity. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA of 1990, states that people may not be discriminated against due to the nature of their disability. A disability is defined as a physical mental impairment that it limits one or more major life activities such as hearing, walking, and breathing. An employer must make reasonable accommodations for the performance of the job of an employee with disabilities. This might include making the work facility accessible with ramps, providing readers for blind personnel, or allowing for more frequent breaks. The ADA has now been expanded to include individuals with alcoholism, former drug use, obesity, or psychiatric disabilities. The premise of the law is that individuals with disabilities can contribute to an organization and they cannot be discriminated against because of their disabilities. The Civil Rights Act and the Age Discrimination Employment Act make provisions for bona fide occupational qualifications, BFOQs, which are requirements of certain occupations for which denying an individual employment would otherwise violate the law. And Hooters is one organization that has a bona fide occupational qualification. There are no BFOQ exceptions that apply to race, although the First Amendment protects artistic expressions such as films in making race a requirement of a role. Examples of BFOQs would be hiring someone of a specific religion for a leadership position in a worship facility or for an executive position in religiously affiliated institutions such as the president of a university with religious ties, such as Notre Dame. Age has been determined to be a BFOQ for airline pilots, hence there are mandatory retirement ages for safety reasons. Sex has been determined as a BFOQ for guards in male prisons. Sex, gender, is the most common reason for invoking a BFOQ as a defense against accusing an employer of discrimination. Courts have established a three-part test for sex-related BFOQs that are often used in other types of legal cases for determining whether a BFOQ exists. Whether all or substantially all women would be unable to perform a job, this is the reason most physical limitations, such as able to lift 30 pounds, fail as reasons to discriminate because most women are able to lift this weight. The essence of the business test, in which having to choose the other gender would determine the essence of the business operation. On a deeper level, this means that hiring cannot be made purely on customers or others' preferences. Although the employer cannot make reasonable alternative accommodations, such as reassigning staff. Privacy concerns are a major reason why discrimination based on gender is upheld by the courts. Most cases of BFOQs are decided on a case by case basis, and these court decisions inform policy and future case decisions. Oh, when I joined the military, I qualified for every job in the Air Force except one. The only job I didn't qualify for was was as a fireman. I couldn't be a fireman because the at that time fighter jets had were a certain height, and because I'm only 5'6", you have to be 5'7" in order to be a fireman. And I was strong enough, I just wasn't tall enough to reach over and pull somebody out of a cockpit. That was why I didn't qualify. It's the only job I didn't qualify for. Everything else I qualified for. Educationally, I aced the ASVAB. So I literally qualified for any job in the military. It was really kind of interesting. And I became one of the hardest jobs that you can have, which was medical laboratory technology. Because medical laboratory technology not only takes in hematology and chemistry, but also microbiology and mycology and urinalysis and blood bank. Takes in a lot of things. And so I had the longest training of any job in the Air Force, even longer than pilot training. Pilot training was 11 months, and my training was 13 months. So there you go. Organizational psychology is the second major branch of study and practice within the discipline of industrial organizational psychology. In organizational psychology, the focus is on social interactions and their effect on the individual and on the functioning of the organization. Some people love their jobs, some people tolerate their jobs, and some people cannot stand their jobs. Job satisfaction describes the degree of which individuals enjoy their job. It was described by Edwin Locke in 1976 as a state of feeling resulting from appraising one's job experiences. While job satisfaction results from both how we think about our work, our cognition, and how we feel about our work, our effect, it is described in terms of effect. Job satisfaction is impacted by the work itself, our personality, and the culture we come from and live in. And I've always enjoyed the work that I did, no matter what I was doing. So I am this person, this face right there. Job satisfaction is typically measured after a change in an organization, such as a shift in the management model to assess how the change affects employees. It may also be routinely measured by an organization to assess one of the many factors expected to affect the organization's performance. In addition, polling companies like Gallup regularly measure job satisfaction on a national scale to gather broad information on the state of the economy and the workforce. Research has suggested that the work content factor, which includes variety, difficulty level, and role clarity of the job, is the most strongly predictive factor of overall job satisfaction. There is only a weak correlation between pay level and job satisfaction. Judge et al. In 2010 suggests that individuals adjust or adapt to higher pay levels. Higher pay no longer provides the satisfaction the individual may have initially felt when their salary increases. Job satisfaction is related to general life satisfaction, though personality and cultural factors may affect both job and general life satisfaction. One study suggested that the relationship is reciprocal. Job satisfaction affects life satisfaction positively and vice versa. Job satisfaction, specifically low job satisfaction, is related to withdrawal behaviors such as leaving a job or absenteeism. It appears that job satisfaction is related to organizational performance, which suggests that implementing organizational changes to improve employee job satisfaction will improve organizational performance. Job stress affects job satisfaction. Job stress or job strain is caused by specific stressors in an occupation. Stress can be an ambiguous term as it is used in common language. Stress is the perception and response of an individual to events judged as overwhelming or threatening to the individual's well-being. The events themselves are the stressors. Stress is a result of an employee's perception that the demands placed on them exceed their ability to meet them, such as having to fill multiple roles in a job or life in general. Workplace role ambiguity, lack of career progress, lack of job security, lack of control over work outcomes, isolation, work overload, discrimination, harassment, and bullying. The stressors are different for women than men, and these differences are a significant area of research. Job stress leads to poor employee health, job performance, and family life. Job insecurity contributes significantly to job stress. Two increasing threats to job security are downsizing events and corporate mergers. Businesses typically involve IO psychologists in planning for implementing and managing these types of organizational change. Downsizing is an increasingly common response to a business pronounced failure to achieve profit goals, and it involves laying off a significant percentage of the company's employees. Industrial organizational psychologists may be involved in all aspects of downsizing: how the news is delivered to employees, both those being let go and those staying, how laid off employees are supported, for example, separation packages, and how retained employees are supported. The latter is important for the organization because downsizing events affect the retained employees' intent to quit, organizational commitment, and job insecurity. Corporations often grow larger by combining with other businesses. This can be accomplished through a merger, for example, the joining of two organizations of equal power and status, or an acquisition. For example, one organization purchases the other. In an acquisition, the purchasing organization is usually the more powerful of the dominant partner. In both cases, there is usually a duplication of services between the two companies, which commonly involves a reduction of staff. This leads to organizational processes and stresses similar to those that occur in downsizing events. Mergers require determining how the organizational structure will change, to which employees also must adjust. There can be additional stress in workers as they lose their connection to the old organization and try to make connections with the new combined group. Research in this area focuses on understanding employee reactions and making practical recommendations for managing these organizational changes. Many people juggle the demands of work life with the demands of their home life, whether it is caring for children or taking care of an elderly parent. This is known as work-family balance. We might commonly think about work interfering with family, but it is also the case that family responsibilities may conflict with work obligations. Greenhouse and Butel in 1985, Butel in 1985, first identified three sources of work-family conflicts. Time devoted to work makes it difficult to fulfill requirements of family or vice versa. Strain from participation in work makes it difficult to fulfill requirements of family or vice versa. Specific behaviors required by work make it difficult to fulfill the requirements of family or vice versa. Women often have a greater responsibility for family demands, including home care, child care, and caring for aging parents. Yet men in the United States are increasingly assuming a greater share of domestic responsibilities. Research also documented that women report greater levels of stress from work-family conflict. There are many ways to decrease work-family conflict and improve people's job satisfaction. These include support in the home, which can take various forms: emotional listening, practical help with chores. Workplace support can include understanding supervisors, flex time, leave with pay, and telecommuting. Flex time usually involves a requirement of core hours spent in the workplace around which the employee may schedule his arrival and departure from work to meet family demands. Telecommuting involves employees working at home and setting their own hours, which allows them to work during different parts of the day and to spend part of the day with their family. This may also be known as e-commuting, working remotely, flexible workspace, or simply working from home. Some organizations have on-site daycare centers, and some companies even have on-site fitness centers and health clinics. In a study of the effectiveness of different coping methods, LaPierre and Allen in 2006 found practical support from home more important than emotional support. They also found that immediate supervisor support for a worker significantly reduced work-family conflict through such mechanisms as allowing an employee the flexibility needed to fulfill family obligations. Flex time did not help with coping, and telecommuting actually made things worse, perhaps reflecting the fact that being at home intensifies the conflict between work and family because with the employee in the home, the demands of family are more evident. A significant portion of IO research focuses on management and human relations. Douglas McGregor in 1960 combined scientific management, a theory of management that analyzes and synthesizes workflows with the main objective of improving economic efficiency, especially labor productivity, and human relations, into the notion of leadership behavior. McGregor's theory lays out two different styles called Theory X and Theory Y. In the Theory X approach to management, managers assume that most people dislike work and are not innately self-directed. Theory X managers perceive employees as people who prefer to be led and told which tasks to perform and when. Their employees have to be watched carefully to be sure that they work hard enough to fulfill the organization's goals. Theory X workplaces will often have employees punch a clock when arriving and leaving the workplace. Tardiness is punished. Theory X supervisors will ignore employees' suggestions for improved efficiency and reprimand employees for speaking out of order. These supervisors blame efficiency failures on individual employees rather than the systems or policies in place. Managerial goals are achieved through a system of punishments and threats rather than enticements and rewards. Managers are suspicious of employees' motivations and always suspect selfish motivations for their behavior at work. For example, being paid is their sole motivation for work. And the joke is, don't think of it as getting fired, Think of it as finally being recognized for your incompetence. Wow. In the theory Y approach, managers assume that most people seek inner satisfaction and fulfillment from their work. Employees function better under leadership that allows them to participate in and provide input about setting their personal and work goals. In theory Y workplaces, employees participate in decisions about prioritizing tasks. They may belong to teams that, once given a goal, decide themselves how it will be accomplished. In such a workplace, employees are able to provide input or matters of efficiency and on matters of efficiency and safety. Another management style was described by Donald Clifton, who focused his research on how an organization can best use an individual's strengths, an approach he called strengths-based management. He and his colleagues interviewed 8,000 managers and concluded that it is important to focus on a person's strengths, not their weaknesses. A strength is a particular enduring talent possessed by an individual that allows her to provide consistent, near perfect performance in tasks involving that talent. Clifton argued that our strengths provide the greatest opportunity for growth. Leadership is an important element of management. Leadership styles have been of major interest within IO research, and researchers have proposed numerous theories of leadership. Bass in 1985 popularized and developed the concept of transactional leadership versus transformational leadership styles. In transactional leadership, the focus is on supervision and organizational goals, which are achieved through a system of rewards and punishments, i.e., transactions. Transactional leaders maintain the status quo. They are managers. People who have transformational leadership possesses four attributes to varying degrees. They are charismatic, highly liked role models, inspirational, optimistic about goal attainment, intellectually stimulating, encourage critical thinking and problem solving, and considerate. Women tend to practice an interpersonal style of leadership. For example, they focus on the morale and welfare of the employees, and men practice a task-oriented style. They focus on accomplishing tasks. Larger sex-related differences were observed when leadership style was categorized as democratic or autocratic, and these differences were consistent across all types of studies. Similarities between the sexes and leadership styles are attributable to both sexes needing to conform to the organization's culture. Sex-related differences reflect inherent differences in the strengths each sex brings to bear on leadership practice. A new and emerging area of research within psychology focuses on leadership and the relationship with leaders from the perspective of a follower. Studies point to the need to examine the leader-follower relationship in both directions, instead of focusing only on leadership, to better understand the dynamics of the relationship. An employee's need for leadership is an important component of the leader-follower relationship. Some individuals are significantly more autonomous than others, and as a result do not respond as well to leaders who provide a lot of structure and rigidity to processes, in turn reducing the quality of their relationship with their leader. Other employees who are high in need for leadership have a better relationship with their leader if they are provided with a well-structured environment with clear responsibilities and little ambiguity in their work. These followers work best in situations where they feel they can comfortably perform the work with little requirement to think outside the guidelines that have been provided. For these individuals, having a leader who is able to set a clear path forward for the employee with little need for deviation promotes a strong positive leader-follower relationship. The workplace today is rapidly changing due to a variety of factors such as shifts in technology, economics, foreign competition, globalization, and workplace demographics. Organizations need to respond quickly to changes in these factors. Many companies are responding to these changes by structuring their organizations so that work can be delegated to work teams, which bring together diverse skills, experience, and expertise. In the team-based approach, teams are brought together and given a specific task or goal to accomplish. Despite their burgeoning popularity, team structures do not always deliver greater productivity. The work of teams is an active area of research. There are three basic types of teams: problem resolution teams, creative teams, and practical teams. Problem resolution teams are created for the purpose of solving a particular problem or issue. Creative teams are used to develop innovative possibilities or solutions. Tactical teams are used to execute a well-defined plan or objective. One area of active research involves a fourth kind of team, the virtual team. These studies examine how groups of geographically disparate people brought together using digital communications technology function. Virtual teams are more common due to the growing globalization of organizations and the use of consulting and partnerships facilitated by digital communication. Each company and organization has an organizational culture. Organizational culture encompasses the values, visions, hierarchies, norms, and interactions among its employees. It is how an organization is run, how it operates, and how it makes decisions. The industry in which the organization participates may have an influence. Different departments within one company can develop their own subculture within the organization's culture. Researchers have identified three layers in organizational culture: observable artifacts, espoused values, and basic assumptions. Observable artifacts are the symbols, language, jargon, slang, and humor, narratives, stories, and legends, and practices, rituals that represent the underlying cultural assumptions. Espoused values are concepts or beliefs that the management or the entire organization endorses. There are the rules that allow employees to know which actions they should take in different situations and which information they should adhere to. These basic assumptions generally are unobservable and unquestioned. Many workplaces offer diversity training to help everyone involved bridge and understand cultural differences. Diversity training educates participants about cultural differences with the goal of improving teamwork. There is always the potential for prejudice between members of two groups, but the evidence suggests that simply working together, particularly if the conditions of work are set carefully, that such prejudice can be reduced or eliminated. Researchers conducted a meta-analysis to examine the question of whether contact between groups reduced a prejudice between those groups. They found that there was a moderate but significant effect. They also found that the effect was enhanced when the two groups met under conditions in which they have equal standing, common goals, cooperation between the groups, and especially support on the part of the institution or authorities for that content. One well-recognized negative aspect of organizational culture is a culture of harassment, including sexual harassment. Most organizations of any size have developed sexual harassment policies that define sexual harassment or harassment in general, and the procedures the organization has set in place to prevent and address in which and address it when it does occur. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission provides the following description of sexual harassment. Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature constitute sexual harassment when this conduct explicitly or implicitly affects an individual's employment, unreasonably interferes with an individual's work performance, or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. One form of sexual harassment is called quid pro quo. Quid pro quo means you give something to get something, and it refers to a situation in which organizational rewards are offered in exchange for sexual favors. Quid pro quo harassment is often between an employee and a person with greater power in the organization. Hostile environment sexual harassment is a type of workplace harassment. In this situation, an employee experiences conditions in the workplace that are considered hostile or intimidating. Isolated occurrences of these events do not constitute harassment, but a pattern of repeated occurrences does. In addition to violating organizational policies against sexual harassment, these forms of harassment are illegal. Workplace violence is one aspect of workplace safety that IO psychologists study. Workplace violence is any act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening, disruptive behavior that occurs at the workplace. It ranges from threats and verbal abuse to physical assaults and even homicide. There are different targets of workplace violence. A person could commit violence against coworkers, supervisors, or property. Warning signs often precede such actions: intimidating behavior, threats, sabotaging equipment, or radical changes in a coworker's behavior. Often there is intimidation and then escalation that leads to even further escalation. It is important for employees to involve their immediate supervisor if they ever feel intimidated or unsafe. Murder is the second leading cause of death in the workplace. It is also the primary cause of death for women in the workplace. Every year, there are nearly 2 million workers who are physically assaulted or threatened with assault. Many are murdered in domestic violence situations by boyfriends or husbands who chose the woman's workplace to commit their crime. Procedural justice refers to the fairness of the processes by which outcomes are determined in conflicts with or among employees. Aggression against a supervisor was predicted if a worker felt unfairly treated or untrusted. Job security and alcohol consumption predicted aggression against a subordinate, and that's why he's carrying the 2 bottles and the gun. I don't know why he's got in his mouth. To understand and predict workplace violence, researchers emphasize the importance of considering the employee target of aggression or violence and characteristics of both the workplace characteristics and the aggressive or violent person. Human factor psychology, or ergonomics, a term that is favored in Europe, is the third subject area within industrial and organizational psychology. This field is concerned with the integration of human-machine interface in the workplace through design, and specifically with researching and designing machines that fit human requirements. The integration may be physical or cognitive, or a combination of both. Anyone who needs to be convinced that the field is necessary need only try to operate an unfamiliar television remote control or use a new piece of software for the first time. Okay, so can't bend over. Human factor professionals are involved in design from the beginning of a project, as is more common in software design. Software design projects, or toward the end in testing and evaluation, as is more common in traditional industries. Another important role of human factor professionals is in the development of regulations and principles of best design. These regulations and principles are often related to work safety. Many of the concerns of human factors psychology are related to workplace safety. These concerns can be studied to help prevent work-related injuries or individual workers or those around them. Safety protocols may also be related to activities such as commercial driving or flying, medical procedures, and law enforcement that have the potential to impact the public. One of the methods used to reduce accidents in the workplace is a checklist. The airline industry is one industry that uses checklists. Pilots are required to go through a detailed checklist of the different parts of the aircraft before takeoff to ensure that all essential equipment is working correctly. Astronauts also go through checklists before takeoff. Safety concerns also lead to limits to how long an operator, such as a pilot or a truck driver, is allowed to operate the equipment. Recently, the Federal Aviation Administration introduced limits for how long a pilot is allowed to fly without an overnight break. He's asleep, and that is it. Okay, well, I'll talk to you next week. I just about fell asleep this time, just like that guy.